How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you to our Season 6, Week 12 around the NCAA recap show. Your Pitt Panthers coming off a 44-24 victory over the Duke Blue Devils that saw CJ Kirk put up a personal best 6 total touchdowns in this one, in leading the Panthers to a come-from-behind victory. It was a pretty shocking game in the path that it took from beginning to completion, in that Duke just blew out of the gates with 2 huge touchdown drives to take a 14-0 lead over the Panthers. Pitt battled back, and then CJ Kirk completely took over the game. 4 touchdowns in the second half, 27 straight points between the third and the fourth quarter. 4 straight drives the Panthers ended up scoring on, and it could be 5 if you want to consider it that way because of the field goal they had at the end of the second quarter as well. So an incredible day for the Panthers, turning things on their head because 2 early interceptions, ones that you'd have to say not really Kirk's fault. The one he got hit as he threw, and it was just one of those things where you can't blame him for those turnovers, and he did his absolute best to completely flip the game back on its head. 10 of 13 the Panthers were on third downs. They put up a huge number of yardage. CJ Kirk 361 passing, 5 touchdown day. Of course, the 2 interceptions, but still a very, very impressive performance. 361 yards on only 33 pass attempts. One of his best games by far as starting quarterback of the Panthers. And then rushing the football, again, another great game. Davion Reynolds, 107 yards on the ground. CJ London, 71 yards, finally getting back in the mix with a nice performance. 6.4 yards a carry for the senior who's really struggled of late. So it's great to see CJ London get back in the action. That meant that Todd Sibley took a little bit of a back seat, but you know, we have so many talented running backs that doesn't hurt us. Also, KJ Welsh, one of his best games as a Panther receiver, 7 catches, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns. Davion Reynolds, 2 touchdowns on 2 screen passes, 3 catches for 92 yards. He had almost 200 yards of total offense. And then Caleb Cannon, big day for him as well, 4 catches and a touchdown. Benjamin Ogden, 77 receiving yards and a 61-yard grab, so he finally makes a big play on the offense. Jay Keys, only 4 catches, but you know, it is what it is. He can't have a monster game every game like he did against Georgia Tech. Ryan Henry, 5 pancakes for the senior lineman. Great game for our right guard there. Avery Heller led the way with 10 tackles, 2 for a loss. And it was a good day. Ronnie Baker finally getting on the stat sheet. He's struggled this year in terms of his ability to get after the quarterback, but 2 sacks in this one for our senior captain, defensive end. Jalen Hill's the sophomore who's our leading sack getter, adding another one to his tally with a sack. It was a good performance from the team considering we didn't force any turnovers. We held Duke to 24 points and we gave them a bit of help as well with some of our turnovers, but we did not force any turnovers from them, and we still ended up with a fairly strong defensive performance. 273 yards against passing. James Sapp did have a nice day, 2 touchdowns, 271 passing. They ran for 140 yards plus as well. Williams for 75 and Hood adding 70 yards on that little triple option that they ran for the touchdown on one of the first plays of the game. So it was one of those games where you got yourself behind an 8-ball early, but then the second half, especially, the defense was absolutely spectacular. A couple of big plays. Isaiah Carey had a 54-yard catch. Smith had a 36-yard catch. Stevenson 31. But otherwise, beyond the few big plays that Duke really took advantage of, I thought our defense was very, very strong. It was another game that showed off the talent that they have and their ability to just continue to stop opposing offenses even in games where they're not able to get the takeaway, because you know you may just be in a situation where you don't get that crucial interception, you don't force a fumble. Can your defense still come up with stops at the moment they need them? And we certainly did that, especially in the second half. Duke had absolutely nothing going, and we were able to come away with a pretty convincing victory after it was originally a game that looked like we might be well and truly in for an upset, or at least in for a close battle. So big win for your Panthers over Duke. We look around the ACC. Florida State knocked off Boston College 42-28. Huge game for Parks at quarterback for FSU. Gives them the 42-28 victory. They go to 5-2 in ACC play. Louisville gets to bowl eligibility with a win over Wake. Virginia Tech 42-21, a ranked late season non-conference game against Virginia. Carter Ford with a very nice game for Georgia, 3 touchdown passes. But Travis Huff just doing what he needed to do. 3 touchdown passes, 3 touchdown passes, only 166 yards passing, but he only had 18 attempts because he ran for 66 yards as well. Henderson, their starting running back, 99 yards and 3 touchdowns as he returns from injury. BJ Manning, 95 yards as well. So a well-balanced rushing attack for a Virginia Tech team that's one of the best in the nation as it stands right now. North Carolina beats Virginia. Miami blows out Georgia Tech. NC State with a big win over Army to get their second victory of the season. They go to 2-8 over a very good Army team. And then Clemson holds off Syracuse 35-20 to effectively wrap up the ACC Atlantic Division title. We look around the country, top 25, UCLA just escapes a 22-point comeback effort from Arizona and still comes away with a 38-35 victory there. Washington beats Oregon State. Mississippi State beats Arkansas in a nice ranked SEC battle that puts beats Arkansas, I should say. Mississippi State with a win there. That hurts Arkansas's chances at potentially winning the SEC because they at this point had the tiebreaker over Ole Miss with a couple of games still to go. Notre Dame beats Mizzou. Cincinnati blows out Tulane. And upset alert, Indiana goes to 5-2 in Big Ten play. They were 0-3 in non-conference play. They're now 5-5 overall, 5-2 in Big Ten play as they get a gigantic upset victory over Michigan in overtime to really hurt the Wolverines' chances at winning the Big Ten because now Ohio State inside track to win the conference. 27-7 victory over Penn State for the Buckeyes in that one. Hurts Penn State's chances, while basically it's going to come down to a playoff between Michigan and Ohio State when they meet for the game here very shortly. Texas knocks off BYU. Ole Miss with a 45-26 victory over LSU. Oklahoma State upsets Iowa State to give themselves a better opportunity to get bowl eligible as we move forward here. Stanford beats Cal. Tennessee knocks off Vandy to continue their upward march in the standings. We do get some unfortunate news. That big Ohio State victory was the deciding factor and the convincing item that took a couple of our big prospects and our number one target committed to Ohio State. Roderick Golden, the Pittsburgh area product, went to the same high school as Mac McAlevey, both from Scott Township, PA. He decided to choose Ohio State. He's the number one outside linebacker prospect in the country, and he looks like an absolute gem. 82 overall at 50% scouting. He's fantastic. We had him in our sights for so much of the season, but after his visit to Ohio State, when they beat Penn State this past week, he committed to the Buckeyes. You see, we were in the lead. We dropped a just ridiculous amount with the law. Or no, I think Notre Dame might have been in the lead or Army, but we were in second or third, and then just like that, the visit to Ohio State, the late season visit, convinces Roderick Golden to join the Buckeyes, and he's going to be a great sign for them. He's going to be a fantastic player. It's just unfortunate that we missed out on his signing. Joe Scott as well goes to Ohio State, 4-star. He's from Ohio, so it was always going to be Ohio State more than likely for Scott, but he was somebody we looked at least the beginning of the season we had some interest in. He's another guy that I wish we'd put more interest in, shown more to try and go after. He ends up being a +5 gem, so another great player we miss out. And then Brandon Moses, JUCO defensive end, goes to UAB, a guy we showed some late interest in, ends up not being particularly great of a player, but we could have always used the depth. But we won't miss out on him as much as we'll miss out on Roderick Golden. I'm absolutely devastated over that. Thankfully, we find a couple of good signings. Rico Shelton turns out to be almost a gem, +4 overall, so he's an outside linebacker that maybe wasn't as heralded as of a prospect, but he can grow into a good player for us. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what we're going to do at outside linebacker. Quell Hampshire was kind of a makeshift fill-in at outside linebacker this year, and now we're losing him to graduation. We'll have a Darion Mitchell hopefully back as a senior next year. We do have some depth in the likes of Deuce Holland. Talik Bridges has been a good backup at outside linebacker, came in as a JUCO. He'll be a junior next year. So we have a couple of juniors and a senior, but beyond that, we don't have anyone that's really going to fit in at outside linebacker. And so Golden is a huge loss for us. He could have played right away, and we're going to really miss him. We are going after Matt Wright heavily. He is our number one target on our recruiting board now, the strong safety that's considering both UCLA and Pitt. So hopefully we can convince him to come to the program. We look around the country. We got Sam Walker, Jr., left end from Miami, 2 sacks, forced a fumble and recovered a fumble in their win over Georgia Tech. Zach Anderson, UNC quarterback, 381 passing, 30 rushing, 5 total touchdowns. They both win NCAA and ACC players of the week. Adam Young, pair of interceptions for Ohio State in their victory over Penn State, gets himself Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week, while Luke Sharp, what a game for him in the win over Illinois for the Nebraska receiver. 9 catches, 226 yards, 3 touchdowns in their victory. Terrence Harrison, senior quarterback, Texas Tech, 5 touchdown performance to beat SMU. David Banks with a couple of picks for Texas as they beat BYU and continue their strong season. Nick Brown, 137 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns for Navy, so a great game for the midshipmen there, while Dwayne Ralph had a nice performance for USF in their victory as well. Travis Campbell and Mark Mackey end up winning Conference USA Player of the Week honors. Almost a 300-yard game for Mackey and a couple of touchdowns for him, so a big game there for the junior halfback. Tavion Carter, one of our superstar freshmen, ends up having an incredible game for Notre Dame as they beat Mizzou. 144 yards receiving, 10 catches, and a touchdown. He also ran for a few yards as well, so huge game there for the true freshman. He's up to 57 catches, 972 yards, and 10 touchdowns on the season as he puts up a great showing. Troy Butler in the Mountain West, 5 touchdowns for the Boise quarterback as they beat Colorado State 47-14. Nick Williams, senior defensive tackle for San Diego State, with 3 sacks in their victory over the Island Boys of Hawaii, so big game there. James Williams, 5 touchdown performance for Colorado as they knocked off Arizona State, while Joseph Beck had 2 picks as the junior cornerback helped Stanford lead past Cal 41-21. And then in the SEC, Jerron Ware, what a day for him in that victory over Vandy, keeping himself in the Heisman conversation. 3 touchdowns rushing, 1 receiving, 250 plus yards for the senior halfback in a big game for him. Andre Cronin with 2 picks in the Mississippi State victory over Arkansas gets himself Defensive Player of the Week honors. Tim Jones ends up winning Offensive Player of the Week honors in the Sun Belt, while Isaac Lambert wins Defensive Player of the Week honors. This guy, he's a junior. He originally signed with Clemson. I remember he was a recruit that we went after heavily, and I believe it was the first season. He ends up committing to Clemson. Did not like the playing time he was getting there. He's transferred to Louisiana Lafayette and has a big game there, a sack and 2 interceptions. Defensive Player of the Week, a player that we would have loved to have on our team, but unfortunately he's plying his trade down there in the Sun Belt. We look at the Heisman race. Dustin Young still top, but Travis Huff with a big performance as Virginia Tech gets a statement win over Georgia, helps push himself further up in the Heisman race. Coleman of USC still there. Jerron Ware with a huge day gets himself in the mix, and Taylor Savage, the Oklahoma sophomore quarterback, is there as well. Some really, really interesting talent. I think it's Young versus Huff for the Heisman as it stands at this point, but who knows? It's actually a pretty wide open race because Young hasn't been spectacular as of late, but Ole Miss has been very good. They're 10-1, number 6 in the polls. Oklahoma still number 1. Cincinnati also still unbeaten. You can see the top 10 stays pretty much the same. The only thing that happened was we had a couple of flip-flops in terms of positioning there. Virginia Tech only goes up to 8 with their victory over Georgia. I thought they might have jumped higher with a nice ranked win there. They don't. You can see UCLA jumps up to number 14 after beating Arizona, because some teams in that top 10 through top 20 rank lose, and we can see some big movement there. Mississippi State goes up to 18. Michigan falls back to 19. Ohio State's now into the polls finally at 8-2 at number 21 after beating Penn State, who falls back to number 22. Kansas State, Oregon, and Miami all come into the polls, while Iowa State, Arkansas, BC, and Georgia all drop out of the rankings. So a lot of movement still happening here as you get those heated conference battles late on in the season, and any kind of upset will surely move the polls around and create a lot of intrigue in the rankings. And the big story now is, as we look at the BCS rankings, the real question mark as we come down the stretch run is, can Cincinnati bust their way into the college football playoff? Because if you look at it right now, you can see you have either 0 or 1 loss teams that could win all of the major conferences. You have the likes of Washington could win the Pac-12, Clemson could win the ACC, or Virginia Tech. You could have Oklahoma win the Big 12, or Texas, Tennessee, or Ole Miss could win the SEC. So all of these different one-loss teams could win these power conferences. And what that means is, if you have all one-loss or no-loss teams from those conferences, does Cincinnati get left out with the fact that they're in the American Conference? And not only are they in the American Conference, they're not even going to have a conference championship game because there's only 9 teams in that conference. So if there are 8 conference games, the one thing they do have going for them, they do have a big win over Ohio State that opened the year. That's really their only major win, and they've only beat 3 teams, I should say, with above 500 records: Ohio, Tulane, and Ohio State. Now, that Ohio State win was a huge one because it was away from home at the Horseshoe. Ohio State's 8-2 right now. If the Buckeyes can win out, that could maybe help the Cincinnati resume, but as it stands, it's going to be tough for them to convince the pollsters that they should be in the college football playoff, to convince the committee to give them a chance and play their way into the top 4. In the Coastal, Virginia Tech, of course, losing to North Carolina means that everything is to play for in the Coastal Division. Miami, Pitt, North Carolina, and Virginia Tech all technically with a chance to make their way into the ACC championship game. North Carolina, Miami, Virginia Tech, all with kind of the best chance because of head-to-head as it stands right now, but Pitt still has to play North Carolina. Pitt still has to play Miami. If Pitt wants to be in, they have to win both of those games and hope Virginia beats Virginia Tech. Miami can get in if North Carolina ends up winning. Miami ends up winning out, and Virginia Tech loses because Miami has a head-to-head over North Carolina. Virginia Tech has a head-to-head over Miami and Pitt. It's an absolute mess, and it'll definitely take the final 2 weeks to see how things shake out. Over on the Atlantic, it's Clemson, who's going to be in the ACC Conference Championship game in that regard. They've clinched their way in effectively. The only team I think they have left to play is Boston College, who can't get into the Atlantic Division Championship. They beat Florida State. They beat Syracuse, which means Clemson has clinched their berth in the ACC Championship game yet again. Bowl game predictions: Pitt projected to play Iowa State in the Russell Athletic Bowl as it stands right now. That'd actually be a fantastic matchup. I'd really enjoy that. I think that would be a great game in Orlando, and I honestly hope that one comes to fruition, but we'll see how things shake out. Looking forward to Week 13 in the ACC. Miami taking on Virginia, Georgia Tech taking on Duke. Another non-conference game for Virginia Tech, interestingly, late in the season here. Louisville takes on NC State. Florida State takes on Syracuse in a very intriguing ACC matchup. And then Boston College taking on Clemson. It's one of those games that Boston College really just playing for pride in this one, and Clemson playing to keep their chances for the college football playoff alive, and that's the only real reason they need to avoid a loss there in the ACC championship game, regardless of what happens there. Cincinnati, like we mentioned, trying to play their way into the playoff, and they'll need a big victory against a decent UCF team. UCF, interestingly, typically known for a good offense. In this fashion, their offense has struggled, but they've had a very good defense. We'll see if Cincinnati can put up some points on the Knights in this one. Michigan State, Penn State should be a great Big Ten matchup, and then the game that will decide the Pac-12 South, I think they're in the South Division, is USC versus UCLA. Going to be a huge matchup. Basically, the winner of this game will be in the Pac-12 championship game. UCLA was in last year. USC was in the year before that. It's going to be an incredible matchup between these two heated rivals down at the Rose Bowl, and I expect a big set of fireworks in this one. I like USC because of Taylor Coleman at quarterback. I think he's the best player in the game, and I think he'll win it for USC, but we'll see how things go. Michigan with a nice non-conference matchup against Army, of course, who just lost to NC State last week. That should be a good showdown. Ohio State taking on Indiana. What's interesting about this one is Indiana, if they win out, they could actually have head-to-head, and they play Ohio State this week. They just beat Michigan last week, and they play Penn State next week. What that means is if Indiana wins out, they will win the Big Ten East and make the Big Ten championship game. If they can win this game against Ohio State and then beat Penn State next week, they will have all the head-to-head tiebreakers against the top Big Ten East teams, and they will be in the Big Ten championship game. That would be absolutely incredible to see, and it's honestly an outcome I would love to have happen. I think that would be fantastic. Over in the Pac-12 again, Washington looking to keep their resume strong with a matchup against ranked Oregon. Oregon has basically no path to the Pac-12 championship game. They just want to look to play spoiler against Washington. They've really struggled this year. Boston College, Clemson, like we already mentioned, should be a great matchup. I expect Clemson to win in that one, but Boston College has been very good on both sides of the football this season, so I think they'll at least give the Tigers a game in this one moving forward. Maybe closer than expected, but Clemson with that home field advantage more than likely takes the victory. And then for your Pitt Panthers, a matchup with North Carolina should be a great showdown. North Carolina offensively has been absolutely incredible. The one area where they've struggled has been passing defense, and that's an area where Pitt has really shined as of late. CJ Kirk, of course, coming into his own. He does make a few turnovers, but he's been putting up yardage for the Panthers and points. And so I think that'll be a matchup. Both teams love to air it out. Both pass defenses are a bit suspect. This could be a game that both teams are able to put up a ton of points in this one, and I think we could have a score explosion in this matchup. It should be a fantastic showdown. CJ Kirk, what a turnaround for him. 23 touchdowns against just 16 interceptions. Now, he did have 2 interceptions in his last game, but 5 touchdowns as well, so a great performance from him. Davion Reynolds up over 100 yards. He's now 70 yards per game rushing, and he's a great threat out of the backfield as well. Saw a great player comp to Alvin Kamara with him. I think that's very intriguing to think of him in that fashion. He's just a great guy. You get him the ball in space, and he can really make anything happen. Jalen Hills, the Panthers sack leader, if you take note there on the defensive side of the football, with 6 sacks on the season. For North Carolina, Zach Anderson, transfer from Michigan, has really been a catalyst for this great North Carolina season. It's amazing how they have good teams year in and year out and seem to struggle. Now they get a great transfer quarterback, and he really takes the reins for them. 23 TDs against 5 interceptions, and he can run the ball as well. 55 yards a game rushing for the senior quarterback to transfer from Michigan. Jared Wade, 59 receptions, 851 yards, is his number 1 target. Now they will be missing right end Jesse Watkins. He's going to be out for 3 weeks with a strained back. He won't be available to play. He's a good player and a guy who I think can grow into a really solid talent for them moving forward. Trey Washington, questionable with a broken wrist. He's expected to play in this one, and that'll be a huge return for them because he is their best, or one of their best players on the offensive side of the football, where they are so incredibly deep. If you look at all of their top players here, it's the offensive side of the football that makes this team tick and where they're going to end up winning this football game if they're able to beat your Pitt Panthers. They are so good on the offensive side of the football. Of course, Zach Anderson, the quarterback, is the straw that stirs the drink. He's got a couple of good youngsters behind him as well in Melton and Long, but Zach Anderson, senior year, comes over from Michigan with Steve Tate starting in front of him, and he puts up an incredible season here when he finally gets his due and gets his chance in Chapel Hill. Melton and Long, like I said, 2 very different quarterbacks behind him. Michael Melton is a scrambler, can run, while Elliott Long's a bit more of a passer. It'll be interesting to see who wins that starting battle between these 2 teams next season. Halfback, they are stacked. Sam O'Donnell, the redshirt senior from Binghamton, fantastic player. He's missed a lot of time this year with injury, but he's an incredible talent. I think he has the physical ability to get to the next level and play on Sundays. He just has to prove a little bit more of his durability. Leon Bellamy is a fantastic deputy as well. He's got 5 touchdowns on the season, over 500 yards. So they're very, very deep at their ability to run the football. They've even got Devin Blake, the junior. He'll be their starter next year, and he's another very talented player. Then they even have Derek Gray, the true freshman, who's going to definitely be an impact player next year as well, as long as he stays in Chapel Hill. Doesn't get his head turned by his lack of playing time this year, but they are very, very set at the running back position. At receiver, again, look how good they are. Jared Wade, 59 catches this year, 67 last year, one of the best receivers in the ACC, and he's a guy that could be playing at the next level for sure. Fantastic player. Doesn't have super abilities, but he's very quick, can get open in a flash, and he's a great player. Akeem Reed, more of a possession type guy. He's very, very solid. Marcus Barron, another senior who's a very solid player, 33 catches on the season. Steve Smith, the junior, probably will take the reins as one of their top pass catchers next year and has had a good breakout season, as has Darryl Brown, but he's a senior, so they're going to lose a lot of that talent. Zach Kunu from Hawaii, the junior, expect him to need to take a big leap forward. This was their year to really step up and make something happen, and they've done that very, very well this year. I like Barry Williams, the tight end, as well. He's a great player, really intriguing guy out of South Carolina. I think he's very, very good. Terrence James, freshman left tackle, is maybe their one area of their line we can exploit because Fontaine's very good. Stacey Carter at center is great, and he's backed up by another really solid player in Chris Cody, who could fill in it for Washington if Washington isn't able to play. He's incredible. And Wade Cantrell at right tackle is a very solid player as well. So this was the year for North Carolina to really excel. They got a lot of senior level talent on their team, and they have made the most of their opportunities and have put up a great campaign so far, and are still in the mix, of course, for the ACC Coastal Division title, an area where they really haven't competed in quite some time. They seem to struggle year in and year out despite the really solid talent that they have on their team. This is a year for them to really excel. Some great players on the defensive line. Meeks is fantastic. If he comes back for his senior year, he'll be one of the most intimidating front four players in the entire country. Johnny Garcia Jr., he was actually a guy that Pitt did recruit for a period of time, ended up going to North Carolina. Very solid player. Kavarius Black, middle linebacker, freshman, as well as Brandon Monroe, couple of good youngsters who are very impressive and will have an opportunity to grow in this defense. Cody Jones, the senior, great player. A.J. Williams is back up a little bit quicker. I like him a little bit more at that outside linebacker position, but Jones has done a good job for them this season. As a senior, his final year in Chapel Hill has been very good. At corner, they're young. They have John Pratt, the junior, who's their number one corner. Desi Stanley, a sophomore. Chris Fuller, a junior. They got Vashon Kraft, a true freshman. So they have a lot of young players. They'll be very good in the defensive backfield moving forward. Corey Brown as well is a youngster that's had significant playing time this season. So they're good there. They're quick, but they're not superhuman quick. So I think with our good route runners, we'll have an opportunity to create some space there. Pierre King's one of my favorite players in the ACC. He's fantastic. 94 speed, 88 overall as a junior. He'll be a draft pick next season, that's for certain. And a guy who's really been an impact player for them this year, Paris Fontenon. He won ACC Defensive Player of the Week earlier in the season, I remember. He's got 3 sacks from his strong safety position, 8 pass deflections. He's a very, very good player, despite his rating only being 70 overall. Chris Edwards, the kicker, and then Frederick, the punter. Not overtly exciting, but they don't kill their team. The real storyline here is going to be their defense is good but young and not particularly impressive, especially in the cornerback position. Their offense is fantastic. They have so many receivers, running backs, and their quarterback is spectacular. This should be an offensive showdown between UNC and Pitt in Chapel Hill. So let me know in the comments who's going to come out victorious in this huge, huge matchup. Also, that Ohio State-Indiana showdown is very interesting, as well as the USC-UCLA matchup. Let me know in the comments who you think wins those matchups. And as always, hail to Pitt. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.